Hello, boys and girls. Now we're going to talk about the animal kingdom, the whole thing. As you look at this chart, I want you to notice that there's three main sections. There's the section here that's talking about sponges. There's the section here that's talking about the Cnidaria. Those are the stinging cell animals. And then there's all the rest of it. See this black line up here? All the way down. That's talking about all the other creatures. And what those three sections are talking about are the different kinds of ways that God designed the creatures. For example, all of the creatures that belong in this big group over here, this big black line, have what we would call bilateral symmetry. Now you probably remember the word symmetry from math, but let's take a look, for example, at this sea slug. If I put a line right down the middle of his body, he would be like a butterfly. He'd be the same on this side as he is on this side. I could fold him over. The sea scallop, the same. The crab, straight down the middle, fold him over. What about that insect? Straight down the center. He's the same on one side as he is on the other. He has bilateral, which means two sides symmetry. Now the animals in this group, they have some symmetry, but it's not bilateral symmetry. It's what we call radial symmetry. It means that their symmetry is more like the sun. Can you imagine that as a circle? Their symmetry is like the sun, the jellyfish, if you look at them from the bottom. And the jellies are more radial meaning circular symmetry. Now the sponges, believe it or not, sponges are animals. They eat. They're animals. But they have no symmetry whatsoever. They grow in whichever way they want to grow. So this says, animals with no symmetry, which are sponges. So sponges come in three different types. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start on this chart on this side, and we're going to actually learn about every single one of these creatures as we go across. Now, what you should know about each of these creatures, so for example, the two kinds of comb jellies, is that this creature is not the only creature in the group. This creature is like the line leader for the group. Let me give you an example that you might be more familiar with. For example, the fishing spider. Is there only one kind of spider called the fishing spider? Is that the only spider in the whole world? Well, of course not. He is there to represent all the spiders of the whole wide world. So if we blew a whistle at the end of Animal Kingdom recess and they all lined up, all the spiders would line up behind the fishing spider. He's there to stand as the line leader for all the other spiders. Same thing over here. Is the butterfly fish the only kind of fish that we have? Of course not. We have lots and lots of fish. But he is standing as the line leader for all fish. So when I show you a picture of, for example, this animal and teach you about it, I want you to remember that that is just the line leader for so many others like him. So here we go. Let's start back at the most simple creatures, which are the sponges. Now I'm going to read to you from my information sheet about sponges. Ready? I'm hoping you can see that too. Sponges are covered with pores. Cells with flagella draw water in through these pores. The cells remove tiny food particles from the water. Water leaves the sponge through a large opening called the osculum. The cells of the sponge are loosely joined. A clump of cells can break off and grow into a new sponge. So that's about the whole group of sponges. Now there's three main kinds of sponges. This kind are called cake sponges. Now this is a red and white picture of a cake sponge, and you can look at that while I tell you about cake sponges. The cake sponge is a type of bath sponge. It is soft and springy because its skeleton is a network of flexible protein called spongin. This spongin skeleton is what remains after all the living cells of the cake sponge are gone. So if you've ever seen anybody maybe wash a car or maybe do some work in the house with what they call a natural sponge, a sponge from the ocean, that's that kind of sponge. Now this kind of sponge is called an encrusting sponge, this one right here. The encrusting sponge lives in shallow waters where breaking waves would wash away any kind of tall sponges. They blanket rocks and corals and can be identified by their bumps. Sea slugs are one of the few animals that could possibly eat an encrusting sponge. This sponge is called a vase sponge. I bet you can see why. There are many colors of vase sponges, including red, purple, and yellow. Few animals eat sponges because they have such sharp spicules, and some are poisonous. Sponges provide hiding places for brittle stars, shrimp, and other small animals. So that is what we've learned about sponges. Now I'm just going to show you a couple more pictures of sponges. Right here, sponges and squirts. Gold sponge, glove sponge, Neptune's cup sponge, inside a sponge. Hold on, I'm gonna try to hold, oops, sorry. Sponges filter food from water that enters by tiny spores called ostia before traveling through canals and out of larger openings called oscula. Hard spicules act like a skeleton to provide support. They're very simple. They just pull the water in, take what they need, and then push the water out again. Those are squirts. We're going to talk about those next. All right. All right, boys and girls, we learned about symmetry of animals today, and we learned a little bit about sponges. And then we'll come back and learn about the next group in a minute. Bye-bye.